Azure SQL Database is a platform as a service from Microsoft. Now, if you would have used SQL Server for application development, Azure SQL is almost similar to that. The only factor what differs is it's a platform as a service provided by Azure. So if we go to the typical definition, what is Azure SQL? Azure SQL Database is a general purpose relational database provided as a managed service. When it says managed service, it is referring to the infrastructure and stuff. It's all managed by Azure. Azure SQL is almost same as SQL Server, which we have been using with application. Now, the reason why I'm saying it's almost is because you get most of the features which you have already been using with SQL Server in Azure SQL, but there are a lot of features which are not available as of today. So that's the reason why it's almost like SQL Server, but not exactly. You don't get all the features which you have already been using with SQL Server. Now, if we look at the different flavors of Azure SQL which are provided by Microsoft, then Azure SQL Database, as I said, it's a platform as a service offering. It's available from the Azure portal, or you can use CLI to provision it. It is available as a managed instance, as a single instance, and an elastic pool. Now, these three flavors are quite unique and very specific to the customer requirement. So, if we talk about the managed instance, it is much more closer to the normal SQL Server database which we have been using. So, on our own VMs and infrastructure. Now you get all the good stuff from the SQL Server available in an Azure SQL Managed instance. So you can create jobs, you can have link servers, you can have a VNet, all the security aspects and everything is all available. The hindsight of it is it's a bit expensive. When we talk about a single instance, it is a standalone database server with a single Azure SQL database on top of it. It is much cheaper. You have different options in that. You can have even a pay as you go option. You can have a flexible option where you provision a SQL database and then it is not charged throughout. It's charged based on usability. The last one is elastic pool, so you can have a couple of databases on the same SQL instance, server instance, and then you can share the resources between the databases based on the utilization. Now, I would just want to keep this presentation very strict to the hands-on sort of setup. So that's why I've not done a lot of slides. So I'll just walk you through Azure SQL database on the portal itself. So if you go to the portal, what I've done is I have created a resource group by the name Azure SQL. And what I'll do is I'll just create a new SQL Server instance. So if I go over here, you can, in the quick links, you can get SQL Server. Or if you even go over here and in the search, you can write SQL. Just make a create. As I said, there are a couple of different flavors available. You can have a Azure SQL database as a single instance, Elastic, or a database server you can create over here. You can also have a managed instance, and you can have a SQL Server virtual machine as well, which you can provision from here. So what we'll do today is we'll create a single database instance. So when we do the create, just like any other service in Azure, you'll get a wizard where you can put all the details, and then that will create the service for you. So let's create the server database, which will be Azure deep learn. Maybe that might be unique. Yep. So let's create a new server. So we'll just use the same name and we'll say SRV. Let's create a password, username. Let's create a password. Then we can select the location. So let's select, I'm in Australia. So let's select Australia East. And then if I say, okay, so that these are the details which are required for the server creation. You can use an existing server as well, as it was showing. This is one of the existing server I have on my subscription. You can also create a new one. So I've just, for this demo, I am creating a new one. The next one is a good one, which is about the configuration of the database. So as I said, there are a lot of different options. So you can have general purpose, hyperscale, business critical. Each of these are very specific to a use case. Hyperscale is something where you can have million and trillion of records, and then you can use the SQL instance for all that heavy lift. Business critical is like high availability, all that good features which are required for business critical application and data sources. For this demo, we will use general purpose. In this, you have two options. You can have a provisioned option or you can have a serverless option. The serverless option is much cheaper. If I click on that, you can see it's just $7.88 per month. That's what will be charged. If I create a provision instance, this will be a dedicated instance for me and I'll be charged around 377.95 AUD. Once I have selected, so I'll just select the provision instance. The hindsight of serverless instance is that because it's cheap, it is not always warm. It's a cold start. So if you're not using it for long, then it will go in the cold state. And then when you make the next request, it will take a while or sometime you'll even get a timeout. It's normally recommended to be used for development purposes and just for POC purposes, but not for production or higher environments. So for now, I'll use the provisioned option. And what you see over here is you have different options. You can have number of cores which you can select on the server. You can have data max size, what's the storage size on the server. So all that you can make a selection over here. There is also option of different generation. These are basically the generation 5, FS, V2, and M. These are the different machine types which will be used for the provisioning of the server instance. So you can customize that as well. I'll take all the defaults and I'll say apply. Once I've done that, next is I have an option to enable VNet sort of security on this. For this demo purpose, I'll just not enable anything. So I'll make it default. You can have additional stuff like the data sources. You can take a backup and then you can restore it when the database is getting created. You can create even the AdventureWorks database as a sample database on this. Yeah, for the collation, you can have your own whatever settings you want. For default, I've used the default settings, but yeah, you can add your own collation. Uh, in the advanced settings, you can have data security and all that stuff. So internally, Microsoft will keep a track of your database, and for any security threats, it will let you know upfront. I'll go to next, and then you can put tags just like any other service. And if I go and say create, it will start to create the Azure SQL database instance. And first, it will create a server instance for us. So mostly it takes a couple of minutes because it would be creating a database server as well as a database instance. So it takes a couple of minutes, but it should be quick, hopefully. So let's wait for a while. In the meanwhile, I'll just quickly walk you through on this slide. So when we were talking about the manage instance, I think so. In the new recommendation from Microsoft list of in the documentation, they have provided that it's highly recommended to use a manage instance if you're talking about an enterprise scenario or any sort of business critical scenarios. The reason being is managed instances, you have better SSDs, so you use the high quality SSDs for data persistence and the transactions are much faster. For managed instance, you get all the high SQL Server native features, which is like you can have a link server, you can have Azure SQL jobs, you can even enable a virtual network on top of it. You can have all the other policies also which you can enable on top of a managed instance. For Azure PaaS single instance, you don't get all these features like you cannot create a link server, you cannot create a job. So just be mindful that you cannot create an external server SQL instance as a link server to SQL Azure database, but you can create a SQL Azure database as a link server to on-prem or on VM SQL Server instance. So that's very much possible. Yeah, I did a implementation for that on one of my projects. That's why I learned about it. But if you go flat out and in the documentation, most of the places it is listed that you cannot create a link server, but it's only for the case where you're trying to create a link server on the Azure SQL database. That's not possible. But if you want to take a Azure SQL database and create a link server of it on another SQL instance, then yes, you can do it very well till you have the connectivity and all that available. So the good part is we have got the instance set up, it's created. So over here, what you're seeing is our database. Now, if we go to our server, so if you see over here, we have a link for the server as well. If I come over here, I can see it has only one database and it has a lot of different features. So there are a couple of features which I'll walk you through in the coming videos. But for on a general note, what if you want to see your different databases, you can go to the SQL Server database. You have firewall options, so this will be one of the good one, which is very important if you're talking about security and enterprise databases, because you should not open your database to public internet. At this stage, this database is accessible to everyone. Uh, Having said that, it's not that I can take the database connection details and just hook it up on my SQL on my SQL Server Management Studio on this machine, because as soon as I do that, it will it'll ask for IP, because one of the basic fundamental is that anything can only access these databases if the IP whitelisting is done and the requests are coming from public internet. I'll just show you what that means. There are others, so you can even have a private endpoint link, and you can also enable this feature with which this particular database will be accessible to all Azure services internally. So that's the database server, and let's go to the database. So yeah, that's the SQL database. Now there are these are the new features which I have seen of recent. So they have got a direct Power BI preview integration, Power Apps. Power Apps is one of the big things which Microsoft has been pushing off recent, and then Microsoft Flows. Uh, so yeah, so let's go on the home screen. So we have all the basic fundamental details about resource group, and these are available on other services as well. So it also gives you the connection string details. So if you come over here, you get the ADO.NET connection. If you have need JDBC, ODBC, PHP, or Go, all the samples are available over here. Let's go back to overview. It tells you the pricing tier. It tells you the connection string. Now, if we go to the configuration, what we can see is, as I showed when we were creating the instance, we did select a general purpose, we selected a provisioned, and then we selected the default values. And if you can see over here, you have all of that. Now, if I want, I can change the number of cores, and if you can see, as I change the number of cores, my pricing is changing. So be mindful when you are setting this up. You will be paying as per your selection of cores as well as selection of the data size. So if you see, I can have 3 terabytes, and then but that will cost really a hell of a money. So yeah, I don't have that much. Let's go back to the default values, which is the bare minimum. Not even 29, 1 gig is enough. And let's go to the vCore default. Better I'll not save anything. That should be good enough. The other thing about this is geo-replication, and this is one of the vital feature which I really like about Azure SQL. Historically, if you would have used SQL Server, creating a replicated server which was SQL replication, it was a hell of a nightmare, because you need to enable a lot of brokers and this and that and whatnot, and it was a long process, and keeping them aligned and active and working was again another big challenge, managing the VMs and all that. With Azure SQL, this is just a button of a click which you need to do, and you can enable a geo-replicated server. Now, what that means is, at any point of time, you have your primary server, which is in Australia East, and that's my server, and this is my database. Now, if I want that everything which I'm putting over here gets replicated to another server sitting at some different location geographically, and there are fundamental reason why you would like to do that. One of the reason is for disaster recovery or for high availability, or even in a scenario where you want to separate out your reads from writes. So all these different use cases, which are very common application level or application life cycle management requirements, all these are very much possible just from a click. And I'll do a full session video on the geo replication thing, but yeah, for now I can quickly show you. If I come to Australia East, my current primary server is in Australia East. I can create another one in Australia East, or if I want, I can create in Australia Southeast, which will be Melbourne region. So if I try to do that, let's put it against, okay, there might be, okay, this location is not available, all right. So that's because of my subscription and stuff. So let me just create another one in Australia East. So as you can see, I can create another database. So that's the region where it will be created. Database name will be the same because that's one of the fundamental of replication. You cannot have different database names, but yeah, you can have a target server which you can custom create another one. So I can use the existing one because it's in Australia East, but I can also create one, and all that is very much doable. You can have Elastic, and that will basically be based on your primary. So yeah, so it's quite straightforward to do that. And once you have done that, uh, maybe let me do that now. So it defaults to no, I cannot take the same server. So if I create another one, so I'll say learn Azure SQL server one, and I'll say login as same. I'll say password as this, and if I say select, that's all good. And if I say okay, so now what it is doing in the background, it's creating another server and a database. So if I come over here and if I open this, so as you can see, it's doing the same stuff. It's creating a database server, and then once the server is created, it will then create a database on that server. So if I go back to my resource group, and all right, sometimes it does this funny thing, doesn't show the resource. So if I go to my server, and if I say go to the, oh, it did create in a different, sorry. So if I come over here and if I say SQL, so sorry for that. It created in my another resource group. So if you can see over here, that's my primary server and that's my primary database. And then I think so I'll use the name. Yep. So now if you can see over here, it's created a secondary database server, and that's, as you can see, it's server one. And I think so it should finish in a tick. So what is it doing now? Yeah, it's creating something. It's creating the database at this moment. So it should be done quickly. And I'll type. So once this database is available, then I'll show you the primary server and the database, and yeah, we'll see the geo replication thing over there. So if I come to my database, yep, and the processing is completed. Now, okay. So now if you can see over here, my primary is Australia East, and that's my primary database. And my secondary is on the server one, it's the same database name, and that's on the secondary. So if I come back over here, All right, so if I go back and if I connect to these databases, and if I zoom this, maybe, so if you see it shows not two instances in the same region because we have selected both in Australia East, but they're sitting on different servers. Okay, so if I come back over here, and if I go to overview, let me open my SQL Server Management Studio and let me check the connection string. So that's the connection details I'm getting. So if I come over here, if I say connect to this, that's right, that's my password. So it will say yes. So that's what I said. It will not let you connect even it's a public internet hosted database instance. Now if I go back and if I go back to the server, because all the security is enabled at the server level. So you need to go back to the server. So I'm currently on the server. I'm going to the firewall and virtual network area. And then what I'll do is it's showing my IP address. I just need to add that in to whitelist my IP address. And if I click on save, uh, that should be quick. Hopefully now I should be able to. Yeah, so that's one way you can go to the portal and do it. If you don't want to do it through the portal, you can also do it from the same experience from SQL Server Management Studio. I have, I think, so 2019 installed on my machine. So if I don't want to go to the portal, I can do it from here. So I'll just click on sign in. It'll ask you the same dialog box, and you can just enable that. So if I connect it, yeah, let's give it a second. It's 203.11.2445. 203.11. Oh, that's a different one. It says 244.5 and it says 225. Okay, let's do it from here then. That's good. So it's asking me to log in. Just clicked. And it's quite seamless. It'll automatically do most of the stuff for you. You don't need to bother about. So it's trying to log me in, and it should be able to quickly just connect. If I come to the portal, there should be an additional entry which should come in. Okay. Yep, so if you see it's logged me in, it's asking to put the IP address. The server you specified does not exist any subscription. All right, so it's because it's using my personal email address. Let me change it to the other email I use. So it basically deals with your subscription, whichever subscription you're using for this. It will log you in with that. For me, default is my personal subscription. Now, if I go over here, it's allowed. If I come back to the portal, and if I refresh this, so if you can see over here, it's added. So that's the IP address which has been added. Now, if I come over here, I can see that that's the database and that's the table over here. For the secondary database, so if I come back over here and if I say, yep, log me in again with one, and then I put, that's the secondary database which I have. And if I say connect, it will ask for similar stuff. And if I go there, and yep, so that basically connects me into my server one, and that's the database which I have on server 1. And if I come over here and if I go to my server 1, if I go to the firewall rules, you can see it has added the firewall rule for me over here. I'll just discard that. Alright, so now what I'll do is I'll just show you some magic. Let me create a table. So I'll just create a table over here, user name, let it be just default and a address. So I'll just save it as user and let's not save it now. Let me just refresh this and no smoking mirrors. There are no tables in this at this stage. So if I click save and I say users and if I say okay, so what should happen is it should create a user table over here and that's good. It's created. It has two columns, username and address. Now I did nothing on this database. As you can see, I'm just connected to my this is my SQL primary database, Azure SQL SRV. And if I go and refresh over here, you can see the database table has been replicated. So it's available over here. So replication automatically took the database table from server and then created it on server 1, which is my replicated database. So that all that magic is done behind the scene. So that's the general view of geo replication and stuff. So it's a really vital technology which works seamless without much botheration. You just need to do a couple of clicks and geo replication is enabled. In the coming videos, I'll show you in more detail about geo replication and security and firewall rules. So hopefully you liked the video and thanks a lot for watching.